Hey there guys, and welcome back. And here we are in the second half of development. At least that's what I'm labeling it, because we're after session 20. Session 21. Now I'm gonna say, because again, as we've discussed before, a lot of the second half is going to be CSS work and getting the stuff displayed correctly. So since that's most of the work, I was considering switching over to the long form sessions. I discussed this very a long time ago, way back at the beginning, that since development of making sure everything looks right and making sure everything is laid out in a logical fashion, since all that can potentially take a while to get done, that later on in development I'd start switching from strict 2-hour blocks to something a bit more freeform and just get done major ideas. Well, I managed to get done a major idea in this first 2-hour block anyway, so I figured may as well just do this session where it's at. We'll see how long that continues, whether or not I can keep on keeping within the 2-hour block range. So, this session basically ended with, there were other things that happened earlier on in the first half of the session, in hour 1. There were other things, but hour 2 ended with, let me switch you over to it, this little demo. So we needed progress bars for various things. For example, we need them for the meeple, or not the meeple, but the sectors. The sectors having their their timers tick up to the point that you can collect them. We also need them for weapons and items for the warm up and cooldown. So I went ahead and I designed a progress bar from scratch, and this is a little demo that I completed of it. Goes all the way up, changes colors as we go up and down. Starts out yellow for the warm-up, gets to red because it's getting hotter, obviously makes sense, and then cools from red to blue. Now I'm thinking about changing the color spectrum here on the back end, but that's, a minor fix moving forward. And the second thing I will note is that you may have noticed, if I run this one more time, 1, 2, 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see that the animation duration is actually different on the front end and the back end. So we'll get back to this. Actually, you know what? Screw it. We'll start off with this just because I've got it up. So kick you over to the VS Code, and I'll get my GitHub up for myself. And we'll go ahead and talk about the progress bar, since I decided to start the stream off with that because I thought it was really nifty, and I was really glad I could get it done in under 40 minutes. So over here on the VS Code, we can hop on over to the demo first just to see what we are working with here on the demo screen. And I do have it open, good. So as you can see, we have a progress bar class here and an inner class, and that is how I set up the CSS. The CSS for this is in combat. I'm thinking about moving it over to site because, again, we can use it for the sectors as well, for your activated abilities in the colony that allow you to collect resources. So for that reason, it may get moved over to site instead, site.css right here. But for the time being, it's in combat because that's what I'm using it for right now. And basically the pattern that we'll be doing is, as you can see, it has a warm up and cool down duration. That was the biggest trick for figuring out how to get this to work, because I tried doing something a little different. But really quick, let's run through the code just so that we get there. Right now, the way I'm having a demo work is off of the animation end callback event listener. So in LiteLike, as you'll see when we get over there, combat actually listens for changes in weapons and items states in their timer changes. It listens for those things instead. But for right now, we're using animation end. So when we click the button, it starts this up. Obviously disables the button so you can't multiple click it. And then it sets the animation duration and style to the warm-up value. And then it adds the warm-up class, which obviously starts in animation. When the animation ends, if warm-up was in there, then we can remove warm-up and we can move on to cooldown. But first we got to change the animation duration to cooldown. And then finally, obviously, just pull cooldown out of there and set to disabled. So what does that look like on the back end? So over here in combat.css, this is what we got. So right now, this is how I've got it laid out for the progress bar overall. We've got a width of 5M and 1M height. I am using M's just because I figure that's pretty scaling uniform as opposed to pixels. And then border obviously is just still pixels, but I figured that was acceptable. Solid border around to make it look nice, and overflow hidden was important because the inside of the progress bar was sticking out otherwise. The inner part, it obviously starts out at 0 width. We will go ahead and change that down here in the animations, but the height is 100% of the parent. And then down here, this is where I had to do some figuring out, down here in the animations. So what I started out with was animation adder warm up, and then linear 0S and warm up. This is how I had it originally. Problem is that adder still doesn't work with animation. It still doesn't work with 90% of things, evidently. 99% of things, actually. So one of those things I was hoping that it would work, but it did not, unfortunately. So I had to start figuring out how the heck am I going to get this done. And after a bunch of troubleshooting, I realized that we can just set the animation duration on the element itself. So again, back to progress bar demo.html. That's this line right here. So we can add this style, and what that will basically look like in code is, or not in code, but on the developer panel, when you're looking at the tree view elements, what you'll see is in style, it will pop up as animation duration 3S, let's say. So that's how that will pop up after it adds that in. So this will get taken from here, and all the other CSS, the timing function and the delay, will come from here. And then obviously we have our keyframes. So starting from background yellow to background red and 0 width to 100% width. And then the cooldown is the exact opposite. Obviously this stuff is going to stay the same with the exception of the name. And when we swap over to it, we just got to make sure to change the animation duration. Again, change this. Animation duration ends up going to 5 seconds as an example. And that will make it work correctly. So again, quite proud of myself that I got that done in just 40 minutes. I was thinking that it might take me a bit longer, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do it now. It's just that for our demo, like more specifically the map demo, the combat in the map demo, in order for it to look anything reasonable, I felt like I really needed to figure it out. So the fact that I was kind of forced because I didn't want it to look like crap to figure it out, and it only took 40 minutes, I was really happy with those results. So that is the duration, the duration. The progress bar done and overviewed in, what was that, like a minute and a half? Something like that. Alright, so about 8 minutes. 8 minutes to get through the whole entire progress bar. That took me 40 minutes, but, you know, that's what the code review is about, right? So, give me just a second. Bit of an itchy throat. Alright, so, next up, let me Control Z just to make sure I don't have any changes. Let us go to the rest of the changes for the session. Let's see where to go to next, because there is a very large section, and then let me just check. I know there's a large section, and then there's a not so large section. Yeah, you know, we'll just go to the biggest change, and the biggest change is over in combat. Combat.js. Combat GUI, sorry. Combat GUI. So GUI/combat.js. And that was, well, something's in here. So to start out with, we added more listeners. Okay. And load combat. So first off, I had to get a reference to player and enemy to start adding listeners for the player and enemy. And then back to I said the animation changes would happen on the callbacks from the timers. So that would be all this stuff. This would be items and weapons getting changed, or I highlighted too much there, but items and weapons being changed. And I also added use item up here because we didn't have that last time. So this will animate the progress bars and remove the activation button from the screen. That's the purpose of these guys. And then down in update input, and let me just check. Okay, it looks like that is the first time I created it. I wasn't sure if I had this for the last session, but according to GitHub, I did not. So all of this code then is new. As you can see, this was a massive block. This was most of the first session. So let's look at it. Let's take it apart. Basically, all those callbacks I added get, as you can see here, redirected to here. And the warm up and damage also. See, that's the funny thing. I was going to say, I guess maybe I had, oh yes, that is right. I did have update input written right here for the last session, but I didn't actually have the function defined. I recall now. That was just blue before. Right. So, anyway, update input, this again, as it says, updates the input GUI for items and weapons. So there is a lot of stuff we got to figure out because we kind of hodgepodged all this into a single function because it effectively does handle a single cell on the table. So if we come back up here, just to remind ourselves, we have these data slots, and this has to manage everything inside of a single data slot, which would be the button. And actually I can come down here and highlight that really quick. There we go. That would be the button and the progress bar. Okay. So it has to handle all that, which means that we got to parse out what exactly we have received in this event. Because as you can see here, we get either a weapon event or an item event. And those weapon and item events are not just, flat. They could be warm-ups, they could be activations, they could be cooldowns. So we got to parse all that information out. So first off to say, we are double listening here, which is what this line says. So basically up here, because of all these that we had to put in order to catch all the changes, I believe it's the first half of that. Yeah, equipment change. So equipment change warm up, we're not actually listening for. That is the warm up is ready. We're not listening for that, as you can see from the notes, because it overlaps with the other one. Because it overlaps with, what was it again? Okay, yeah, it will overlap with combat clearing the warm up flag. So for that reason, we continue down. These are the attributes we need to figure out of these events in order to properly parse what we need to do. So one of those things, just look inside of the event is basically what all this code is. And because they're different events, we got to look in different places depending what it is. And you can see in a couple places here, for example, the warm up and damage. Those are both from combat. And in both of those, the object type is obviously going to be weapon because we're dealing, because that's what the weapon callback is. The use weapon combat, let me just open that up so that I don't have to make you use your imagination. Where is combat? Combat.js. So here they are. So this is damage right here, and this is warm up. So those are the events returned by this handle weapon. Even though an item could deal damage, it does not actually call the damage callback. It just causes generically use item. Any damage that you want to catch off of an item, you'd actually catch off of the player HP change instead. This damage right here is what I probably should more specifically say, is being used by us to figure out when to start cooldown. Because if a weapon dealt damage, then it needs to go on to cooldown. So, back on over to the GUI combat. So, we parse all that stuff out of these. And first off, we need to figure out the loadout. The loadout is up here in this block. Loadout weapons and loadout items to figure out what data slot we're going for. So weapons obviously go to loadout character.weapons. Item obviously goes to character.items. And then we get the index from that loadout. So that will give us our slot number. This index could also be called slot number. As you can see, we use it to reference data slot. So once we have all that information, actually character. In character, then we got to parse out whether it's the player character or the enemy character. Easy enough. We've done this a couple times in the code above, so you should be familiar with that one. And moving forwards, we go ahead and get the table cell, so that data slot cell. And then we got to get references to the button and the progress bar. And then if the subtype is activated, display, etc., etc. And I do have to update this because, as I stated, the progress bar demo I only just finished. So I do need to update this to properly set. Yeah, you see how this says data set duration. So I do need to update this and change how I was handling the data set. Because again, my original plan with the animation was to use adder duration, which is how this is set up. But one of those things that's very simple to change. That will just change from dataset.duration. Instead of actually even doing this, when we first populate combat up here, right there, we will instead just set the data duration at this point, and this will say data warm up and data cooldown. Data cooldown, and we can just set that right now, so we don't even need to adjust that here. But instead of adjusting that there, we need to adjust the code down here to say progbar.style and animation duration. So we need to adjust the code down here to look like that. But again, that's very, very simple to do. And this right here, obviously, data set. We are currently in warm up, so now we are on cool down. So that's how that will look when it changes, and I just got to change that for each of these lines. Otherwise, as you can see, if you're reading through this, we hide the button and disable it. I do that on both of these, even though after this point, it should already be done, just in case. That's just paranoia, just in case. Same thing with displaying the progress bar. And then, actually, one thing I should say, I should correct here. We will also have to now get a reference to progress bar.inner, or progress bar, rather, .inner, or div.inner if you prefer. We'll have to get one of these query selectors in here as well, because that is where we're setting the animation duration. So, simple enough. Again, it's a simple fix, so I'm just going to undo changes, because one of the things I always get myself confused when I leave changes in here, and that will be something I don't forget to do next session. So, and then obviously it's just like the other one where we swap around the class lists, and just like the other one, double T there, just like the other one, we just reset all this stuff. So the display goes back to initial, the button goes back to solid, etc., etc., etc. So that is those changes there. And let me check the GitHub. Now, the rest of these changes are going to be changes to work with this, is the big thing. So, let's see. All right, first off, a very important change with our event listener class. Event listener class up here. In trigger event, we were not actually providing the event type before. So obviously, as you can see, event type.description, we were doing that here. But I decided to also set event.event type to event type, just for another way to reference it. And this here is the symbol instead of the string version. So that gives us another way we compare to what we want to look for. So that was a simple change. And then, like I said, the rest of it is really just a bunch of timer updates. So, for example, items I had not updated last session the items to also use cooldowns. So, I mean, not cooldowns, timers. So you'll recall we did this last session, but I didn't come down here and do this guy. So now we did that guy, which meant that we also needed to update timers. And then on top of that, we need to go back over to character, and character over here. And over here, we had to item update timer, and we had to change and adjust for cooldown, to trigger all this stuff. Actually, I don't believe we were even calling a callback here. Let me check the GitHub. We're in update items. Yes. Okay. So update items did not exist at, no. Yeah. Update items did not exist at all. So we added this function. It looks exactly like this function, just without the warm-up, right? And yeah, that was the next thing. So once we had the timer, the update timer in here, then both of these functions then had to call the trigger rather the equipment change and the items change events, because we were not triggering those before. So now we trigger those, and that gets that gets called when the cooldown state changes, when the timer more specifically changes its state between is ready and is not ready. And obviously that will trigger on both, so we may have to actually check those. Let's see. No, okay, I take that back. It will only trigger on the one end, because if we update timers, the only thing update timer does is update cycles. So back over here, items.js. All this does is update cycles, and all update cycles ever does is set the isReady flag to true. So since it never sets the isReady flag to false, we don't have to worry about that. So yeah, we will only ever activate this on the rising edge, so to say. So moving on up here, back to where we have all these events now that we have to start populating in, let's see, get default event data. We added a get default event data to character, and this automatically sets the character to this character. That way we never have to set character in any event data that is generated by the character type, or prototype, I guess, more specifically in JavaScript. Again, we're dealing with a bunch of callbacks now, so that had to be added. Let's see. Other changes. Alright. My bad if I am repeating myself here, but over in combat.js, which is combat.js. Is this really combat.js? I guess it is. In the loop. No, I don't think I did. So back to, we have to add in update items. So this got added in. This was another thing that, in theory you could, theoretically you could miss it. Just forget to update the item timers, because they are a separate function than the update weapons. I'm considering consolidating these into one, just update timers for player, which would do both the weapons and the items. But I have not so far. Oh, the other thing, actually, that is something I did not mention in update weapons and timers. That is under combat characters. As you can see here, we're slicing just the loadouts. That is something I totally glossed over. So this will not update timers on anything that is not in the current combat. So if you have a weapon in slot 6, that is not part of your current combat loadout, and therefore it will not bother updating the timers on those. Same thing with items. You might have a million items. Will not bother updating the timers on anything that is not currently in combat. Easy. Let's see, what else do we got? Got all that. We might actually be done. Oh no, we are not done. Okay, that is a very minor update, so we're just about done. So I missed this in items. And items use. So here in items.use, originally it was just this. Now we also have to set the cooldown. You know, we got a clear cooldown ready and then unfreeze so that it starts counting up again. So that is that. We could also, I should say, trigger an event here. Maybe not here. It really depends where we want to trigger the event. So we are triggering the event in combat. So over in combat.js, that's this one over here. When we use the item, as I stated at the very beginning, or towards the beginning, not the very beginning, but towards the beginning, the handle item will call the use item callback. We could also have a character use item callback. Character. And let me just see if I did make provisions for that. Okay, the only thing I have here is items changed. So frankly, what this would require is, well, what would make it useful, rather I should say, is to add a use item, and then one of those things call items.useItem, wherever that is. There we are. So subscript that to this, and then, or maybe do it the other way. See, it really depends, and that's why I haven't added in yet, because it's easy enough to just call it from combat, and the although on the map, I guess on the map, because you can use items on, well, you don't use items on the map, you use items when you are in town, when you're collecting loot. When you're collecting loot, you can use items. So that's the only other place where we'd have to activate, or not activate, but call the items change callback. So since that's the only other place where we have to call items change, it's probably not useful to put it on the character itself. Probably just let map do that. Assuming that it's handled in map, it may be handled in events. We'll find out when we get there, when we cross that bridge. So that then is everything. So yes, again, I am absolutely very happy that this turned out so well. This progress bar, I was very, very skeptical that I'd be able to do it well, because again, as I've stated many times, I am not confident at all in my CSS abilities, since I don't do it hardly ever. But this one ended up being simple enough. So the only concern I might have is one of those things. Spacing in CSS can be a little bit weird. So as you can see, the activate button is kind of overhanging there. I'm just checking really quick. Yeah, so I mean, it may be one of these things that I might have to come back in here and add, what is it, padding? It's not margins, so it should be padding, like 5px. Nope, that is not padding. Okay, maybe it is margin. Margin 0px, 5px. Oh, I got that backwards. Margin 5px. Yeah, I got it backwards. 0px. There we go. So I might have to do something like that to play with the, depending how it shows up on the actual combat screen. But pretty much all done, it looks like. So this is interesting. Huh, alright, so I've never seen squiggly lines on the elements tree in the dev tools. Let me go ahead and pull this up for you guys. There you go. Easy. So I've never seen these squiggly lines before on elements. I wonder when those got added. So first off, I know that they don't like you using just straight up button. They prefer you use input type button. I don't know. Oh, okay, never mind. That is button type attribute is not set. So I guess more correctly, I should have done edit attribute? No. Add attribute. Type equals I actually can't remember what the button attributes are. What's it saying now? I mean, it has been set. I know input type is button, but whatever. We're screwing around right now. Not really necessary. Just getting distracted. Not attribute. Yeah, add element. Edit HTML. Title. Hello world. Title. Whoops. There we go. We happy? Huh. Alright, whatever. Again, we're playing around right now. Not really necessary. So, that is everything for this session. Again, happy how it went out. And, again, just as a reminder, moving forwards, we may be changing how we order, how we do sessions, just depending on the speed at which I make progress. Because, again, in the near future, a lot of it is going to be just fiddling with stuff like I was doing just now with this margins and stuff right here on the borders, which takes time but is not really interesting to do a code recap on. So we'll see what exactly happens with that. I will be logging all my time. I'm not going to like skimp on logging the time just because it's not interesting. You know, I won't lie about how long this is taking me. That's the plan. I want to be upfront about it. So that is everything from me. Thank you guys for watching if you have been. Look forward to the neat session, and I hope you have a great, wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world. And